will be having very great advantage out of this meeting. Well, our last but not least presenter today is, as Ms. Farron has already mentioned, hopefully I can pronounce the name of the professor correctly. Professor Dr. Jeroen van der Meyer. Is that correct pronunciation, Professor?
That's perfect.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I'd like to give the audience a brief introduction about yourself. So Professor van der Meyer is a teaching staff, a full professor at Shenzhen University in the Shenzhen district, Guangdong, China. He has been teaching there from 2018 to the present time. He was also staff in a Shanghai International Studies University from 2008 to 2018. And he was graduated from Leiden University in Leiden, Netherlands in 2008. Is that correct, Professor?
Not quite, but it sounds good.
Okay, all right. Okay, hang on. Okay, this for me would be a very, very nice and interesting material, because I just ran through the your abstract, and I thought, wow, this is a very, very interesting and very new for me, because we've been saying things like chit chat, zigzag, etc., but it's never been coming to my thought as something that people theoretically understand. Okay, so Professor Jeroen will talk about the hang on, it's sorry, I have to go through like about applaud, yeah, this article about a new approach to words of the type like zigzag, chit chat, etc. in English. Okay, so Professor Jeroen will tell us more about this phenomenon, a linguistic phenomenon. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Professor Jeroen to give the presentation on his article. The floor is yours, Professor.
Dear colleague, Christian, thank you very much. Greetings from China. Is my screen kind of visible, or is it better if I turn off the couch?
I think it's fine. It's fine.
It's fine.
Okay. Thank you very much for organizing this this workshop. It's been very educational, trilingually, and that's wonderful. I think we should do this more often, yeah, in the future, yeah, even if we can travel freely, because it's a great opportunity to get to know each other's work. Actually, my talk sounds more difficult than it is. It's actually very simple. And I'll show you my slides, go through them fairly quickly. If you want to, Maria also has a PDF of the slides, and so you can look at them at home later. Or the article that is based on is also available as a PDF. So you can read more. If I'm not totally coherent, then you can read it better in English. Here come my slides. Is this visible too?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So that's the title. Yeah. And ablaut just means a vowel change. Sorry. And it's about English. Yes, we don't often think about English as having many kinds of reduplication. Yeah? Indonesian, of course, has, but English also has. Yeah? And we can even find 5 kinds of reduplication in English. And I'll focus on these zigzag words, like chit-chat, like Christian said. And there's a kind of a problem with these words, yeah, because they're clearly a pattern in English, many such words. I was surprised by how many. But you can't make new forms like that, you know, from existing words. Yeah? So it's not a morphological process like plural or other derivational processes. It's not productive, or maybe it's a little bit productive. We don't actually know that. And to solve this problem, we propose to see zigzag words as a construction, and not as a rule or not as isolated words, but as a construction, like in construction grammar. I'll tell you a little bit about that. Okay, so what's reduplication? You probably know all this. A process to achieve some linguistic function, like make a diminutive, or past tense, or a plural very often, like in Indonesian. And there are different kinds. Yeah? Full reduplication, so that the words are completely repeated. You know examples of that. There's partial reduplication, when only a part of a word is repeated. And there are also many examples of that in the languages of the world. Or fixed segment reduplication, where in the output form, the reduplicated form, you have to have one or more specific sounds. Like zigzag, yeah, like it has to have an I in the first syllable and an A in the second syllable. So where does English fit in, yeah, in this kind of system? A little bit about the meaning of reduplication. Yeah. Sometimes, often, reduplication is iconic, yeah, so that you have more of the same thing, like a plural meaning for nouns, or iterative meaning in verbs, do it again, or do it for a longer time in verbs, or intensive meaning, yeah, like very beautiful, or intensive meaning like that. But sometimes the meaning is not iconic, and it's not immediately clear from the fact that it's a reduplication. Like in Sanskrit, it is used for perfective tense. In Turkish, it's used to make a noun out of a verb. So basically, all kinds of morphology can be done by means of reduplication. So in English, maybe there are 5 kinds. Yeah? So we have the vowel change reduplication, either with IA, zigzag, flim-flam, chit-chat, or with IO, like in crisscross, ping-pong, and these kinds of reduplication. And also many words of that. There's another kind of reduplication, rhyming reduplication, like hodgepodge, argy-bargy, helter-skelter, super-duper. And that's also interesting. For instance, yeah, can we why is it super duper and not super duper or super super, right? Can we predict why it's D there in the second part? That's not the concern of this talk. We focus on these zigzag words. There are also isolated words in English which have 2 parts, same parts, like bye-bye or night-night, no. In child language, you get this a lot. And some of these words may come from child language. The dates there are dates when these forms were first used in English. And some are pretty old, but not as old as I thought. And some are pretty new. Some phrases are also reduplicated, repeated, like same old kind of expression. Like we said, zigzag and super duper, and these words in 3 are not productive. They're just a sets of words, and no new such words are formed, at least not many. There are also 2 other kinds of reduplication in English. And these are not so well known. I would like to introduce them briefly because they're kind of funny and interesting, and they could be analyzed in similar ways. The first of these is known as salad reduplication. Yeah? Twice the same word. Yeah? So it's a kind of full reduplication. And it's used in a very specific sense. The example there is given. A says, do you want a tuna salad? B says, no, I want a salad. I want a real salad. A salad meaning in the prototypical or the original sense of the word. Yeah? So not with tuna, but with lettuce. Yeah? A real salad, plain salad, a salad. And this is used quite a lot in English, especially in the media and in novels. Here's one example. I wasn't expecting this when he said to meet him at his house. I was more or less expecting an apartment, but this is a fairly modern two-story house, a house, meaning a prototypical house, a real house. He closed the front door behind me and heads for the stairs. I trail behind him. That's from a novel, and there are more examples like that, and if you pay attention to it, I'm sure you'll find some. The second kind of reduplication in English is fixed segment, SHM reduplication. And that has been analyzed before too, and an example is given there. We have to put together a budget for our plan, and B says budget schmudget. And so he's dismissing the suggestion by A that we need a budget, and we don't need a budget at all. The bank will give us all the money we need. So that's dismissive kind of reduplication. And you can also find it in the news headlines, newspaper articles or novels. And it's also kind of dismissive, typically occurs in dialogue, in responses to what another speaker says. Here's one example from a nice book about the Mozart effect. Yeah, sometimes in kindergartens, they think that playing Mozart will make the kids smarter, but that doesn't turn out to be true at all. And somebody looked at that and said, Mozart effect, Schmozart effect. Yeah, so Mozart effect doesn't exist. Yeah, dismisses this idea that Mozart music in kindergartens or elsewhere can make kids smarter. And so the line there is the title speaks for itself. And so speakers of English are supposed to know this from their knowledge of English, that this is a kind of dismissal of the previous suggestion. Okay, so that's by way of introduction to reduplication in English. Yeah, but now we'll turn to zigzag. First, I thought maybe there are 20 words like that, or maybe a bit more if I look carefully, but it turns out there are hundreds of words like that. And we became interested in that, where they come from, how old they are, and then the question turned up. Yeah, so should this be a grammatical rule, or how should we treat them in the grammar? Yeah, if we do want to do that at all. We'll turn to that. It's based on joint work, with my PhD and MA students, very much collaborative effort. I thank my brilliant students for this, working on this paper and on other papers. And it's just come out online. You can get a PDF from the website or from me if you want to. And I'm very interested in what anyone has to say about this topic. Okay, our data come from various sources, and people were already interested in this like 150 years ago, and made dictionaries and lists of such words. There's some other data too. At the end, there's a list of references, and so you can look at it. We decided to make a database with all kinds of information of these examples, like the age, when they were introduced into English, where the words came from, if they're nouns, verbs, or adjectives, what they mean, because that's not always clear, any spelling variations. And we were also interested in the extent to which these words were still used in British and American English. So we also included frequency of use, and we had example sentences. And the whole database is included as an appendix, yeah, in that paper I mentioned. Here's a list from the corpus of contemporary American English. I can see that you can probably arranged by frequency. You can probably recognize the first ones, but there will also be words, yeah, that you're not familiar with. And one question that came up during this research: when do we count a word as being part of English? So when do we say a word has died out, or and when do we decide that it still actually belongs in English? Is it the dictionary that decides, or native speaker knowledge? How should we test that? That's a real question, and not one that we have decidedly answered. So all in all, we found 298 words in these sources, distributed across different sources. We also used Google Ngrams, which is a great source for looking at words and the history of words, finding examples. We looked at American English. BNC is the British National Corpus. We found 28 words, but that's a much smaller corpus. And we decided on a list of 174 words, which appeared in one or more of these sources. And so that's quite a bit more than I thought there would be. Here's some examples which you can also look at your leisure. And it's clear that these some of these examples are a little bit dismissive too, yeah, and a little bit disparaging. There are nouns, verbs, and adjectives, and in general they seem to be quite flexible in their word class. Yeah, so dilly-dally is normally a verb, but you could also use it as a noun, or a dilly-dally tail, you could use it as an adjective perhaps. Flexibility seems to be a trademark of these kinds of words. The stress pattern is also important. So you say flim, flam. So maybe a little bit more stress on the first part, but both parts seem to be stressed, and the vowels cannot be reduced to unstressed vowels. The oldest word, if you want to know that, it's pitter patter, already from 1400. Mishmash, shortly after that. Riff-raff, also very old. And the newest words are words like jingle, jangle, and ticky-tacky, 1962. And the picture there is from Google Ngrams, where you can trace the history of these words very, very nicely. So most of the words were introduced in the 16th century. A little graph here, where you see that 16th century was a heyday for these kinds of words, and then gradually fewer and fewer were introduced into the language, and more died out. Okay, so we talked about the shape of these words, reduplicated, two identical parts. The first part has the vowel I, E, and the second part has A, A. So it's a kind of fixed segment reduplication. And this is consistent except for one example, wishy-washy. Wash has an O, and so it only has an A in the spelling, but an O in the pronunciation. The meaning is that all of these words are kind of jokingly or mildly pejorative, so bad connotations, but not very bad. Three subcategories, perhaps. One is polarity, from one side to the other, zig, zag, wig, wag, snip, snap. And that's related to the fact that E is a high front vowel, and A is a back vowel, or maybe it was a back vowel in the 16th century. So you have the sound symbolism here, where opposing vowels, polar vowels, are crossed with a polar meaning. Words like dilly-dally, shilly-shally are also kind of related to this, signaling hesitation, and futility is also involved, like chit-chat is idle chatter, right? Knickknacks are useless or decorative things that you keep around for no good reason. So they're all kind of pejorative. Okay, let's turn to analysis. So what people have written about this before, and one source was intriguing. Miller, 2014, about the lexicogenesis of English, says this kind of reduplication is no longer productive, but this is true only of the official language, official English. Many individuals continue to coin formations of this type. And so we didn't know any individuals who continue to coin formations of this type, but we actually did find some, like on the web, and these are discussed in the article, like frit, frat. It's not a normal word in English, but it has been used. Fig, fag, same story. So that's why I said you can never be sure about productive or not. Yeah, maybe for some people it is productive. And that will also come out of our analysis. So on the one hand, these words form a pattern, perhaps clearer for some speakers than for others on an individual basis, like Miller said. They are pairings of form and meaning, basic meaning, polarity, and they have partly the same form and partly the same meaning. On the other hand, also like Miller says, the pattern is not productive, like other kinds of morphology. So you can't take a word like swim and make swim, swam, and everybody will know that this is swimming, but not in a good way. It doesn't extend to new words easily. Maybe sometimes for some individuals, but not in the main language, in the standard language, so that everybody will understand it. So the question is, how should this kind of pattern be represented in the English grammar? Some people will say it doesn't have any role to play in English grammar. It's purely lexical, and that's it. But we say that's a pity, and we don't like that. Some people will say, it's actually a rule. It looks like reduplication. Let's analyze it as reduplication. We could do that, but we also don't want to do that. Maybe as good Dutch and Chinese speakers and in our cultures, we want something in between. And we want both ways. And we want something that has a little bit the best of both worlds. And that's what we are trying to do here. So there's a great work by Mattiello, and she offers a very good description of phenomena like this in English and many other things that she calls extra grammatical or borderline grammatical. And she says that these words violate universal properties and principles of grammatical word formation. That is a little bit strange to us, because words like zigzag are perfectly well formed English words. They're not forbidden. So if they really violated universal properties, we would expect them to be ungrammatical. But of course, she is right that these forms are not productive, or this pattern is not productive. So her answer is negative, and this pattern plays no role in the grammar. But we still want to capture this pattern and the speaker's knowledge in some kind of way. If we can do that, we think it's better. We could also treat reduplication as a straightforward rule. That's how it's done for many processes of reduplication. And an analysis like that is readily available in optimality theory. I can show you how that works, but maybe it's a little bit technical, and you can read about that later if you want to. It's actually very simple. You have a form like chat. It must be reduplicated, and there must be an I in the reduplicated form. So chat is perfect reduplication, so it doesn't violate any constraint against reduplication. So is chit, but these forms are not faithful to the input form, and they don't have an I. So the minimal way of repairing this form is to introduce this I here, making chit-chat, which is not faithful. which is faithful, but it doesn't satisfy this constraint on reduplication completely. So that's why this form is chosen in the grammar. So it's possible to analyze chit-chat and zigzag as a phonological rule, but it's not a good idea. Sometimes it's not clear what the input form actually is, like zigzag. For chit-chat, it's clear. It could be chat, but in English, there's no word zag to derive zigzag from. Flim-flam has no base for reduplication. Usually the second part is base, like in chit-chat, comes from chat, but sometimes the first part is, like in rickety, rackety. Rickety is an existing word from which rickety would have to be derived. So that also is a difference. And the most important thing is that it's not productive. So you can't use it with lift or swim or other words that happen to have I or A to make a form that people understand. Okay, so we wanted to have our cake and eat it. So best of both worlds, and not give up everything, anything, find a middle ground between these two approaches, a compromise. Recognize that there's a pattern, which native speakers know, but not make this part of the rules or constraints of the grammar. So chit-chat must be monomorphemic, and it forms a kind of pattern. We find a solution in constructions, construction grammar. You can also read about that later. First introduced for syntax, Adele Goldberg, to capture certain syntactic constructions in syntax. Then it got like lower down to morphology, like my countryman Geert Boy wrote about this a lot. He applies it to compounds and derivations in English and Dutch, and extended this to historical morphology too. So what we are saying is that even single words, morphologically simplex words, can also be treated as constructions. And so not morphologically with affixes or compounds, but single words, morphemic. That kind of follows from the definition of constructions, which is absolutely broad enough to allow for this kind of thing. And so people have, when they have given definitions of constructions, be something like a morphological rule or pattern that combines sisters. So that is still morphologically complex forms. But Holmes and Hudson say any unit of information which is stored in the grammar can be a construction. So that's already single words. Boy is even more vague or more broad. It says a pairing of form and meaning, which could be anything. Very broad and very useful for our purpose. So that's what we're saying. Zigzag is construction. I've written it down here. It looks mathematical, but it's actually also very simple. And so the form is on the left hand. It's two syllables. The first one has I, the second one has A. It's preceded and followed by the same consonants. So the CI before the I, same as the CI before the A. They're two syllables. They both have stress, meaning they're both phonological words. That's the form. And the semantics, the meaning that this corresponds to, introduces something like polarity of this form. Like zigzag is a form that has polarity meaning. We could do more in this construction, like we could specify it for word class, but since it's so flexible, maybe we don't do that. And this kind of construction meaning is added to the lexical meaning. So if you compare chat and chit-chat, chat has no polarity meaning attached to it, but chit-chat does. Okay, we could also include the spelling. Why not? It's also something that native speakers know. Like often these words are spelled with a hyphen. And definitely, this is descriptive linguistics, not theoretical very much, or explaining. it's a description of a pattern. That's what we're doing here. Yeah? So it's not a rule that derives something or a constraint against something or a template that is filled in. It's a description of a pattern, construction. We can also give some meaning to this observation that different speakers may know this pattern more or less. That's exactly what Miller said. That is what these examples that we found on the internet, like UD is Urban Dictionary. That's what these examples suggest. Some people use this, others don't. And so the pattern may be stronger or weaker in individuals. Okay, so that's basically the solution to our problem, to find this kind of compromise. And talk more about constructions and the relation between constructions and productivity. We saw that these words were mostly introduced in the 16th century. So that's when it may have been productive, but after that it died out. As a rule, it died out as a rule, but left a trace in English as a construction. And that is our view of the history of this construction and these words. For morphological theory, this is also kind of interesting. So because there are different kinds of theories, like the item and arrangement model. If you take a morphology course, you learn about these things. But in this approach, there are no blocks like morphemes. There are just constructions. There are also no rules. And so item and process model is also not adequate. What we like is the item and pattern model. And so items are individual words and patterns are captured by constructions. And that is also in line with views on the lexicon that we see nowadays. How do we organize these words? Patterns are very important, not only in language, but in cognition in general. People are great pattern recognizers in all kinds of things. And it's not surprising that they also recognize it in words and in language. Okay, so how could this be extended? Like we said, there are other reduplication forms in English with IO and the productive reduplication processes like coffee, or the Mozart-Schmozart effect. And that could be applied, could be analyzed using constructions too. It's basically a sophisticated or a little bit sophisticated description of these patterns. Could be applied to sound symbolism, and like all these words in English, like spleen and splash and splatter, have something to do with each other. Also a form meaning pairing, so construction. Many languages are very rich in reduplication. Like Indonesian again, other Southeast Asian languages, African languages, Chinese dialects, other languages spoken in China, and constructions could be used to analyze these kinds of processes in many other languages. And so if we want both again, constructions and like a constraint grammar, like in optimality theory, that relation between the two also has to be investigated in more detail. So are there constraints on constructions? This is an interesting question, but we haven't got any fixed answers for that yet. Okay, so last slide. Reduplication is interesting, even in English, which is not normally thought of as a reduplication language. It's interesting because it ties so many parts of the grammar of language together, like syntax, phonology, morphology, and also semantics. Pragmatic situation matters a lot. So it's a holistic approach, this constructions. We wanted to find our compromise, not throw the baby away with the bathwater, and we tried construction morphology for that, a holistic approach to language. And our conclusion finally is that these constructions can be used fruitfully even for monomorphemic words. Some reference that you can look at later. I thank you very much. I welcome your comments. If you want a copy of this PPT, the organizers have it. If you want to read the paper, organizers also have it, or send me an email at my address there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Jeren, for a very nice and insightful presentation. And I believe all of our audience were amazed about your presentation. Yeah. All right. This is the, I would give some time for the participants, the attendees. If you have questions, you might ask the Professor Jeren right now. And bearing in mind that we probably have only short time left, so let's see if we have. Let's see if we can allow a couple of questions. Then I will let it just flows. And if the times say us that we have to stop, then I will stop the question and answer question.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So
I'm reading the questions. I'm reading the questions on the chat. So from Susan, I'm interested about Zigzag and Mozart's Mozart because I like classical music. Yeah, so this is yeah, so it's not about classical music. Yeah, although that's also interesting. Yeah, whether speakers of some languages are more musical than others. This about, yeah, so like in Chinese kindergartens, yeah, there's always music playing when the children enter the kindergarten. Yeah? And one of the things is they think that will make the kids smarter. And some people investigate this for a long time. Yeah, so when this effect shows up, like after a year or immediately, but it doesn't seem to help the kids' intelligence at all. Yeah, so unfortunately, yeah, so of course you can listen to Mozart, it's very beautiful, but it will not make you smarter, yeah, as a kid or as an adult. And so to dismiss this kind of idea, yeah, these authors used the expression Mozart effect, Schmozart effect, yeah, meaning that there is no Mozart effect, yeah, that it's not true, yeah, that makes kids smarter. Okay, but the relation between music and language is absolutely fascinating, especially if you also look at tone languages. Okay, the second question from Susan. Hello, Susan. What asking about your main construction street was forming parent. Well, I think that, so the question is, it's difficult to detect a stable meaning in these words. Yeah, so it's a little bit vague, and I think that's also one of the advantages of the construction-based approach, that they can be a little bit vaguer. Yeah, so it's not full grammar. Yeah, so but it's also part of native speaker knowledge, and native speakers can know some things better than some people are experts at some things. They know something very well. Some are good at discriminating plants. Yeah, know a lot about this or not about that, or know more words in a certain area. So it's not surprising, yeah, that these patterns can be known a little bit more or a little bit less by speakers, and that their meaning can also be a little bit vaguer, yeah, than the meaning of a single word. Yeah, if that's true at all, because, yeah, words also have different meanings and can be vaguer or more explicit or more precise than other words. So would it make sense to talk about different construction, like salad? Yes. Is that productive or not? I would say yes. Yeah. So given the right pragmatic circumstances, you could have any word that you're talking about, like I'm sitting at a table here, somebody comes in and says, is that a real desk? Is that a desk? Or what is that? What kind of desk is that? Mm-hmm. Is that a fridge behind you? Is fridge? Yeah, it's a fridge, a real fridge, yeah, not a freezer. Any word can be used like that. So that's why I think it's productive. And so, like I also said, yeah, pragmatic circumstances are totally crucial, yeah, in this kind of way. And in the paper we have more examples of this, and I have a nice collection of salad examples and bias schmias examples, and they're all hugely entertaining, and people know what they mean. Yeah, so English speakers. Okay, are there any other questions?
Yes, if you guys have question, please ask question. You might ask directly or might write on the chat column. Yeah, while waiting for others to ask question, I have a question here, Professor Jeroen. I was wondering about what is there any influence that brought by this reduplication? I mean, in terms of social or relationship between society, you know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, in a class of society, for example.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's interesting too. Probably, yeah, we didn't talk about this kind of reduplication, like the Mozart effect. Yeah, probably spread from Yiddish or Yiddish forms of American English spoken in New York, because Yiddish has shma as an onset in many words, and it's kind of pejorative words, and probably it spread from there. Yeah, so it was useful for other speakers, and other speakers started using it. But nowadays, yeah, so maybe that was like 100 years ago. Nowadays, this kind of pattern is found both in British and American English. Yeah, so I think it has proven its worth, and people generally understand it. What is being done if speakers use this kind of expression. I don't know where the salad words come from, who used that first. Yeah, maybe that's like Californian. And I don't know how old these words are, but that's something, that we could look into further.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor. Okay, probably I'd like to have one more question, because I'm afraid we have only a couple of minutes left. Or if you have anything to add, please, Professor. Yes.
Do I have anything to add?
Okay.
I skipped some things, like examples of full reduplication and partial reduplication. There's all kinds of interesting historical questions, like what's the relation between full and partial reduplication? And so, full reduplication seems like basic, just repeat the whole word. And I'm not sure, but I think, it makes sense to investigate whether partial reduplication always is derived from full reduplication, so that you have full reduplication first and partial reduplication second. And also, iconicity, about meaning, is a very interesting topic. Also look at that for Indonesian. So the question could be raised if full reduplication is always iconic. So if it always addresses a plural, for instance. Or iterative or durational aspect in verbs, or intensive meaning in adjectives. Okay, so I said this at the end of the talk, and so reduplication is like a primary source, of information about the connection between form, phonological form, morphological form, and function, like semantic or pragmatic meaning. So maybe that's true a little bit of all kinds of morphology, but reduplication stands out for me. Many languages have it. Many languages have different types. So now we have a little project going in Shanghai, looking at different parts of reduplication, like also in Chinese names. And Professor Günther's talk yesterday, about Jie, Jie, Mei, Mei, Ge, Ge, Di, Di, all of them reduplicated. And turns out that girls' names in China are more often reduplicated than boys' names. And we also have an article about the same group of students and me about reduplication in Chinese names, given names, that show that if you hear a Chinese name that's reduplicated, you can be 80% sure it's a girl. Not 100% sure, but 80%. And it's also different between spoken language and written language. I recommend that article for another presentation.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Jeroen.
Thank you.
All right, guys. It's been interesting listening to the presentation of Professor Jeroen. And if you have questions, probably you can reach him directly. I think the committee has his address and the contact number, I'm sure. So you can reach him out directly. Well, as a conclusion, I would say that the study of reduplication is an interesting thing to analyze and to study more. And hopefully this phenomenon will add to the richness of the language of our language would be our community would have. Yeah. Okay. By having said so, I'd like to say thank you once again, Professor Jeroen, and hope to see you again in the next conference.
Okay. That will be wonderful.
Thank you very much, our audience. And I hand it over to the Farron. Farron, and it's yours.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, Mr. Christian Lewer, and also Professor Jeroen for the insight and very interesting presentation. And unfortunately, we need to end this international webinar. We will proceed to the closing ceremony. We please all participants to stay still on their position, and we will begin the closing ceremony shortly. Excellencies, distinguished guests, participants, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite the head of Language Studies Center, Patimura University, Frau Mary Nikijulu, SPD MA, for her remarks. And afterwards, I would like to request the head of Language Studies Center to officially close this international webinar. Respected Frau Nikijulu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Farron. Can you hear me, Farron? Is it clear?
Yes, audible,
Yes.
ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Farron. So the Honorable Professor De Beer, Professor Susanna Günther, Secretary of Language Studies Center, Ibu Jenny, and all the staff, moderators, seminars committee, and all the staff, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that all of you have well done through the 2-day seminar. So it is my great pleasure that you had fruitful discussion. I think today's is not enough. This seminar has performed a valuable function in that it has enabled invited keynote and speakers, also presenters on the many aspects to give us their views. In this third international seminar, whose main theme was the language and its prospect in the future, I would say that I hope we would learn new ideas from each other, which we could adopt to further improve our research on language, which would make clear the knowledge and the new ideas in the language research awareness. I observe all excellent presentation and active discussion. So I can conclude that the purpose of this seminar has been completely accomplished. I would like to pay my deep respect to all the participants for your participation in the seminar. I hope that what you have learned through this seminar will help you a lot in doing research on language. The 2 days seminar will also further strengthen the friendly ties among the speakers, presenters, and participants. Finally, on behalf of the Pattimura University, I would like to express my appreciation to all the invited speakers, Professor De Beer, Professor Susanne Güntner, and all participants, all other presenters here for taking time out of your busy duties to attend and to share us your valuable contribution in the seminar. Thank you all. Last but not least, I would like to thank the seminar committee for organizing the seminar and ensuring it runs so smoothly. I would like to close my remarks and officially announce the end of this seminar, wishing the future prosperity of all the participating speakers, language officers, and universities, the good health and stay safe in this pandemic COVID. Thank you for your attention, and I hope we will see again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Frau Mariani Tujulo. As we bring our third international webinar on language and interdisciplinary research on language to a close, we once again thank you, keynote speakers, invited speakers, presenters, participants, as well as committee for their valuable contribution on this international webinar, and hope that this event has given you a much clearer understanding of language and interdisciplinary research on language. We would welcome the opportunity to return with another moment of webinar on various interested language topics and issues in the near future. I'm Francia Michelle Ganlohi on behalf of committee, signing out.
Thank you so much, everyone. Professor Güntner, danke Ihnen. Oh, so aktivieren Sie bitte Ihre Audio. Wir können Sie nicht hören.
Sorry.
Ja.
Ja, ich danke Ihnen ganz herzlich. Ich habe mich so gefreut, bei Ihnen hier zu sein, und wenn nur stundenweise. Es war ein ganz tolles Erlebnis. Wirklich ein Höhepunkt in diesem Semester für mich. Sehr
Okay,
schön.
danke
Danke an alle.
Ja,
Sie haben
danke
eine ganz tolle Truppe.
Wir bleiben im Kontakt und vielleicht nächstes Jahr oder in der Zukunft können wir eine Joint Research oder so eine Idee
Gerne.
zusammenarbeiten. Danke Ihnen. So, danke, Prof. Susanne Güntner. Professor Jeroen van de Beer, hello.
Hello.
Yeah, personally, I would like to thank you too.
And we thank you very much for organizing this. It went wonderfully well.
Yes.
So do it again in the future.
Yes, yes. I hope the pandemic COVID will stop nearly, and then you can visit us in Ambon.
I would love that.
Yes. So Professor Günther too, maybe we can meet in Ambon personally here at the University of Pattimura for the next seminar, yeah? Also the other presenters, Ibu Rita Marwanaya.
Guten Abend, Frau Nikiyulu.
Guten Abend.